So good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's session, Work Well, Lead Well, Building Mentally Healthy Tourism Businesses. We are pleased to be able to provide this training through the Sector Council program. My name is Lynn McDonough-Hughes with the Tourism Human Resource Council, and we're delighted to have you here this morning, and I'm pleased to introduce this morning's session. We respectfully acknowledge that we live and work on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, which is covered by the Treaties of Peace and Friendship. We are all treaty people. Michael Devenney is the founder of WorkInsights and the Mindset Project, where his work sits at the intersection of mental health, employee experience, and business performance. Most recently, he has published the first Canadian study on mental health in the tourism industry, highlighting the connection between employee well-being, retention, and business outcomes. So welcome once again, everyone, and I'll pass it on to you, Mike.
Thanks, Lynn, and appreciate people coming in on the first sunny day we've had in, I don't know how long, but it's nice to see. But the best thing I can say is I told Lynn it's supposed to last for the next 10 days, so we might actually get used to it. So as Lynn said, with my business, WorkInsights, I really work on workforce analytics. So I've always been fascinated by why people do what they do. So how they work the way they do, and of course that means how people lead the way they do, because the two are connected. And this part, in terms of leading like mentally healthy workplace, is incredibly important to me, both personally and professionally. So just for background, like I have a complex form of PTSD. And the only difference between CPTSD and regular PTSD is that the complex form comes from childhood, and it means that you will have it for your entire life. Like you're not going to move out of it. So I worked really hard to escape it, to pretend it wasn't there, which of course, as you can guess, made it much worse. And it was only when I was around 50 where things got to a point where I could no longer work. And I ended up having to sell the business I had. But I am an entrepreneur, so that lasted for 3 months, and I started a new business and then another one. And my interest was in, am I the only one, or do other people feel like this too? Because a lot of people really don't talk about their mental health and how it's affecting them. So I quickly found out that I was definitely not the only one. And that took me down the road of really understanding and I'm an analyst, so I love data. So how do we put numbers to understand like what's actually going on and can make decisions? So that's really how I came down this road. And I find that you're in one of the more fascinating industries, because I think, just thinking about it this morning, that you actually bring joy into people's lives. When people are at your organizations, they're there actually to experience some happiness in life. And so that's a pretty good thing to go to work for in the mornings. And so that would be my big comment to start, is that you're in a pretty special place to be able to impact the people, both from visitors and customers, but also the people around you. And one thing that came through, and we'll talk a bit about data, a lot about data as we go through, but meaning at work was one of the highest ranked aspects from the Canadian study that I did for tourism. A couple of things that I would mention just to have real clarity is that the experience that employees have at work is 69%, so about 2/3 responsible for the customer experience. So for you, more than any other industry, that's a really direct connection, because your customer experience is so much of what you do. And then 73% of customer experience relates directly to business results. So there's a direct connection between how employees experience the working environment to how your visitors and customers are going to feel to the business results that we see. So I think a lot of times leaders don't see mental health as a business issue, but I think it's probably the biggest business issue we have right now. We do have a mental health epidemic, And that is when I'm always asked, how do I describe culture right now? I would say tired. And so that's leading to a lot of different responses. And with the new world we have around us, with the United States, I'll leave it there, but that certainly adds more pressure to how we're experiencing what we are. But today, what I wanted to say right up front is that mental health is can be both a challenging topic, but it also can be a really encouraging topic. And one of the reasons I'm always really open about my living with PTSD is that it has not stopped me from working, it has not stopped me from contributing, and it has not stopped me from enjoying life. It's just made me a lot more aware of what works for me and what doesn't, I guess. It's the way to look at it. So you might not know it, but right now I'm in what they would call a depressive stage. So I go through, it's almost like bipolar. I'll go through cycles of both depression and I never seem to get the up part, but usually through that. But again, this is something that when someone's going through a depression, it doesn't mean they're on their couch crying all the time. It doesn't mean they can't laugh. It doesn't mean they can't be enjoyable for someone to work with. Can't means they can't provide great service for customers. So a lot of this is just the experience of what it's like. So we'll talk a lot about this as we go through. And one thing I will say is that I'm going to ask for participation, but if you've got questions, just ask anytime. Just put up your hand, jump in, whatever works for you, because I'm quite happy to answer questions as I go through. And as you probably already have kind of surmised, I'm pretty open about anything you want to ask. And I'm also really easily distracted. So if you're not enjoying where we're going with one topic, just bring another one up and I'll probably go right down that road. So with that in mind, let's have a start. And I'm going to remember to share.
And Mike, I'm just going to jump in and say that people feel free to leave your cameras on because we did this as a meeting so that it could be engaging and interactive, and so that Mike can see faces and not just blank screens. So
Yeah, but whether you're two people or not, it's great to leave the camera on. So what we're going to talk about, and I put a different title than Lynn had. I forgot which one we used, but it's the same presentation. So stress teams, strained businesses. So just how do you turn mental health into an actual business strength? So the intent today is really, how do you create a mentally healthy workplace? Like, what does that look like? And can you have a really high quality working experience while at the same time focusing on mental health? And I've had different owners of businesses say, I enjoy the presentation, but I don't want you to come into our organization because then people will think we have mental health issues. It's kind of like, well, you do. And this is one way to actually deal with it honestly and find out where things are. So root problem that I find for owners of businesses or managers and leaders of business in tourism and hospitality, how does mental health impact you? Really operational instability, that would be it. So overall, like the mental health for people in the tourism sector is fairly strained. And I do a calculation called the Employee Net Promoter Score, which is how likely are people to refer others they know to work in this business or this industry. So for the industry, it's about 6%, which means there's about a 6% likelihood that someone working in tourism would refer someone they know to work there. That's not great. Even more so, 31% would actively discourage others from working in the industry. And this comes from the Cross Canada survey we did. Sentiment. So we're going to talk a little bit about AI and mental health a little later as something kind of different and new. But we looked at the sentiment of people, and the sentiment on a scale of -5 for very negative to +5 for very positive was 1. So it's not encouraging. The one thing that kept coming through over and over again is how much people enjoy working with the customers, the visitors, the people that are there. So they enjoy their work from their interactions with others, but not so much in terms of the working environment. So what we want to do too is also reframe this from being something we can't talk about to being something that we're really comfortable talking about and doing something with as well. So what's needed is really an action plan, to be honest, something that people will do. How do we build a more resilient workplace? So what does that look like? So just a quick question. What do you believe is true right now about how work impacts people in tourism? Just anybody, a couple comments. Like, what do you think is true in terms of what the work environment's like for people? Go, Brad.
There's a lot of pressure, especially as busy season is in full tilt in some parts of our tourism industry.
Yeah. What type of pressures would you say? Like
High volume.
volume. So going to be a lot of workload.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, great. Any other ones?
I think in a lot of businesses, we are all overworked and understaffed. And that's a chronic problem that the industry has.
Thanks, Laura. And that's going to definitely create some stress. And I always like threes. Is there a third one that you might think would be true about the way the industry is right now?
Yes, I have one. People are so unpredictable. The employees never know what they're going to encounter during their shift that day. And people, the mental instability of people, not just the employees, but the guests coming into the hotel, that's a big factor as well.
Yeah, Celeste, you picked a big one because so I've done some work with the Caribbean tourism organization as well, and I did a lot of work around mental health there. And biggest issue that came through is the shift in visitor expectations in terms of their patience levels, what they thought they were looking for. And again, like I was going to say, part of what you do is bringing a joy into people's lives. Sometimes people aren't open for it, and there can be reactions. And how do you not take that personally? How do you not let that, weigh on you over the day? So a lot of things can trigger people. So it was interesting in the Canadian study, we asked, who who creates the most stress for you, and it was the actual customer. So on one side, as much as people found the most meaning in the relationships with customers, they also found them the most stressful in terms of, like you said, we're never quite sure the way it was going to be. It could be a really great shift depending on who was there, and otherwise it could be quite different. So exactly right. So just talking a little bit about the report we did, and this was cross-Canadian. It was full-time employees, by the way. When we did it, we missed the seasonal employee. So this is full-time employees of all the different parts of the sector. And I'll just mention a few things that came through. This is a direct quote from someone in the survey. We talk about mental health, we need to talk about mental health, listen to the frontline staff who give feedback about their issues and do something about it. So when you mentioned pressure, 45% of all people felt pressure on their mental health. So the overall number rating for their mental health was only 63%. And so that's somewhat low. And I've done different analytics for long-term care, teachers, like HR, all different types of sectors. And tourism did rank towards the high end. So we'll look at the numbers as we go through, but 45% of employees would rank their mental health as poor or very pressured. So that's a bit of a struggle to see. So what that looks like is 12% of all respondents said their mental health was good to very good, only 12%. So that is really low compared to other industries. Poor to very poor was about 15. I think some people were fudging on that one because I thought that was somewhat low for all the comments that came through in the assessment. So 15%, but 30% were in that highly pressured zone, which means they're on that kind of burnout level moving over. So any quick comments about the numbers that you'll notice? There's a big one on the bottom line in the middle. The group that has the highest mental health issue, managers. So a lot of times we're looking at managers as the people who will hold everything together and help people from the front line, and also pass information to the senior leaders and executives. They're the ones who have the highest incident rate of mental health issues, so 24%. And owners had the lowest. So that doesn't mean they're not under stress, but I think they have more control over what they're doing, and that probably comes through as lower propensity for mental health issues. But if you're working for small to medium-sized businesses, about 2/3 of owners of small, medium-sized businesses will have a mental health issue sometime during their working years. So this is, to be honest, just all around us. But what's really important, I think, on this one is that the impact of managers can't be overstated. There's many reasons for it, and I'll spend a little bit of time talking about that. So managers have the highest incident rate on the mental health of others as well. So not only are they the ones who are experiencing the highest level of mental illnesses, they also have the greatest impact on others. So again, about a 53% impact on frontline and other employees around them. So I feel we're in this time of what I call the accidental manager, that people didn't plan to be managers. They just became managers because the position opened up and they were moved in, particularly over the pandemic, because there's just so much change. So we now have people who are in a role that they didn't necessarily want or see for themselves. And they most likely have not had any training in terms of how to have these conversations. So that's why you're going to see a really high instance of mental health for managers, but they also have, like I said, the greatest impact on the people around them. And you're not going to be surprised that a lot of what we talk about today is how do we help the managers be effective. And what came through in terms of looking at managers, it's interesting, there's that old comment that people don't leave a company or business, they leave a manager. That's not necessarily true anymore. Most people tend to like their managers. It's just that they don't have access to them. Most managers are stretched so thin that they don't have the time they'd like to have to support people. And if they're experiencing pressures on their mental health at the same time, that starts coming out to where people are. So what does this table say? So my boss supports me. This is on the fourth one down. My boss supports me to know my team and the other people I work with. 44% say no. So almost half the workforce are saying their managers doesn't help them connect to the people around them. So that doesn't really help them in terms of feeling like they're part of a team. And my boss, the very bottom one, my boss has time to manage the workplace well and support me and my team members. 45% of people say no. So we've got almost a half of the workforce saying they don't really know how to work well with the people around them, and their manager isn't really there to help them move through. So that creates some big problems. What they do like is they feel their boss sets a good example. I expect they're working quite hard all the time. You talked about pressures, Brad. So my guess is that managers probably have a lot of pressures on them, so they're working quite hard. And high percentage, almost half of their boss cares about their future, which is something to build on. So again, one of the big pieces here is not to say there's anything wrong with managers or they're not good people. It's the fact that they probably have so much on them. And Laura, you talked about like how stretched people are, like managers would be very much so. It's that they don't have the time and training to do what they'd like to do. So managers are probably I think the single biggest touch point in terms of building a mentally healthy workplace. Helping managers will help everybody. And if managers can help their teams, teams will bring that back to the customers and to visitors. So it's a really nice cycle. But I would say managers would be the first and highest area of priority for all of you to look at coming from this session. There's a culture of silence, which is really interesting in the sense that it's become much more acceptable to talk about mental health. But there's been other studies done by McKinsey that shows, like, alarmingly, that more than half of people would rather not work with someone that they know has a mental health issue. So that was tough for me to know that half the people out there would prefer not to work with me. And that's mainly because they weren't aware of what mental health or mental illness is and what it looks like. So we've done a lot of work on stigma that we're able to now talk about it. So the overall rating for the tourism industry was actually really high. So 78% of people feel there's no stigma around mental health in the workplace. Typically, it's in the 40s and 50s. So this is extremely high. So that says a lot. But for some reason, employees don't feel comfortable talking about it, which isolates them. So there's no stigma, but yet they don't talk about it. Any idea why that might be?
Maybe people are not talking to anybody and they just want to focus on the work instead of talking with other members.
Yeah, so if that pressure's there, you just got to do your job and just move on. So that came through quite a bit. The biggest reason was checking boxes. People felt primarily that the mental health initiatives that were happening in tourism businesses were mainly box checking and not really having those honest conversations. When we looked at comfortable sharing and expressing feelings constructively at work, 38% felt they couldn't. So a lot of it might be that they really feel they just have to do the job and move on. But these are some of the lowest ratings we had overall. Comfortable having conversations with colleagues. Again, 41% said they couldn't. And again, you'll see stigma. Only 9% didn't feel there was a stigma about mental health. But still, we have 40% of people saying they don't feel comfortable talking about it. And that sense of isolation does start adding to the pressure, and that creates a lot more stress, which leads us to the next thing. I think the single biggest thing that's going on in the industry is the stress. It's really high, 27%, almost 28%. So more than a quarter of all employees rank their stress as very high. And so we look at different levels. So 28% in that range is really high. So when you have someone really highly stressed, that means they're probably ruminating a lot, they're worrying, they're anxious. This moves them into a position of probably moving into some type of mental health issue. The main causes of stress, you're probably very familiar with these: chronic understaffing, dealing with managers, and what they call the negative work culture. And a lot of that would stem back to the manager in terms of not having time to introduce people and connect them to people in their team. So the stress levels came through as very high. And that is, to me, always a big issue. Stress, when there's a really high level of stress, it almost doubles the likelihood of mental health issues being developed. So stress, a lot of times it's just something we accept in our life, and don't really probably look at how impactful it can be. But stress is something that can have a huge impact on the way people are, and it depends on how they deal with it. But for most people, stress can lead down the road to things like burnout, anxiety. If it gets worse, it moves into depression and can move into other types of mental health issues. So stress for me is always the leading indicator. And as an industry, tourism has a really high level of stress. So that's from, again, understaffing, pressures, all those things that you talked about. So I'm just loading you with really happy things for the morning, but I promise we're going to move into like a reframing here. But part of it is just understanding this is where we are. So again, on a business implication side, poor mental health leads to a much greater likelihood of people leaving, the turnover piece. It also leads to people not really wanting to encourage other people they know to work for the same organization. And it also leads to a lot of dissatisfaction in terms of the work they have. So despite that, people will stay. Your turnover rate was not as high as I expected for full-time employees. For seasonal, I'm sure it's much, much higher. But part of this is now looking at, okay, this is where we're at. What are the things that are actually working and what does that look like? So the positive work experience, which was, it's funny when we talk about things like mental health, we look at the people who have mental health issues. We rarely look at the people who are happy and in a good place. And I think that we miss a lot, because what is it that makes people really happy and comfortable in the workplace? So we found the three biggest things were that they have a voice, there's flexibility in their job, which I know is tough, and the ability to share and express feelings at work in terms of how they're feeling constructively, not by throwing something across the room. So these three things are huge. And what we also found is what really kept people in the industry was a confidence in their skills. They found meaning in what they did. There was a challenge to learn and grow, which is a lot of what people are looking for. And surprisingly, an openness to change. So these are things that if you're looking at a value proposition, there's the opportunity to really shift the perception of the working environment to something that really can be quite positive for people. And again, what came down to the relationship with the immediate supervisor manager had the biggest impact on overall well-being. And that positive relationship, if it was there, tripled the perception of a positive employee experience. So I can't, I guess, emphasize enough how much managers make a difference. Key gaps. So mental health resources were not seen as being adequate. Only scored about 58% overall. So really high percentage of people didn't feel they had the coverage they needed. The stress and burnout was really high. 61%, almost 2/3 of employees have a high to moderate level of stress, and the manager relationship. So I think I've kind of pounded that one through. So we'll kind of move into, okay, what can we do about it? So how do we use those to actually make some practical changes? One of the comments from the survey respondents was, I've known coworkers that have gone off on stress. They never hear from work or manager, and it's never a back to work plan for them. So feeling like once you're out, you're out. So there's really, even though the stigma may not be there, the impact of it certainly is. So what do you think would be needed to really improve the mental health? So we talked before about the pressures. What about the other side? Like, what do you think needs to be in place to support the mental health of the tourism workplace? Any thoughts? Well, Laurel?
I think having processes in place for when an employee brings concerns to you or brings up their mental health and their well-being, like knowing what you're supposed to do, what the action plan is as a manager when that happens.
Yeah, so you just hit on probably the biggest single issue for people is how do you have the conversation? And I'll just talk about it now because it's just so important. Sorry, Mamta? Brad?
Having quiet spaces or ways that people can go and go for a walk and get their head out of work for a few minutes and get them resorted.
Yeah, getting away from something for a few minutes makes a huge difference. You're right. Stephanie?
I think that there's also, I mean, that quote touched on it there too. It's not just the conversation, not just showing people or having a guide on how to have a conversation about mental health, especially when it's gone too far, but also processes in place for disability management. So if a person has gone off, who contacts them? How often do you contact them? What types of things do you talk about and what's kind of off limits? Because sometimes I find that some leaders, they want to reach out, they care about their folks, but they're not quite sure not only what to say, but what not to say, because there is some legal limitation there.
Right.
So I think it's building that talking points, and I mean, I just talked about the disability management process, but I think it's building it into a lot of other processes. So having the talking points on performance management, performance appraisals, introduction to the company, dispute resolution, just helping leaders to understand, you know, that it's, yes, it's an uncomfortable conversation, but it doesn't have to be scary.
Yeah.
And I think too, it also reflects back on what you had said about a lot of leaders today may not have envisioned themselves in the positions that they're in today, but through lots of circumstances have found themselves in those positions. So with that in mind, trying to support those folks who may need some extra tools and resources available to them.
Yeah, very much. And this kind of leads us to this conversation piece, which is, so one thing I always make really clear is like, you don't have to be a therapist. So there's no reason for you to think about treatment. So it's just having a conversation. And I've been through so many conversations because of everyone. So I've written very openly about my mental health, and I published a blog for a lot of years. I decided to, when I came out, I decided to slam the doors open and come out everywhere. So did a lot of work there, and it was unbelievable, the response and support, but it was also unbelievable, like some of the conversations I'd have with friends. So I think there's two conversations we have around mental health. One is when someone comes to you, and one is when you're worrying about somebody and you go to them. So I think those are two-way conversations in the sense of when someone comes to you, all you really have to do is listen. They just want to talk. So at most you ask questions. You don't have to solve it for them. You don't have to make it better. You just need to listen. So when I'm coming to you, I really just want to talk. I just want to be heard. And so if a manager or someone else is having this conversation where someone they work with or someone's reporting to them brings the mental health comment to them, it's really to listen. And like you said, if there's processes in terms of how to help them with supports, you'd provide that and ask them if they want that. I always think it's the asking that matters. What you don't do is what I find most people do is either, oh, I know just what you should do. No, you do not. Like, you don't. Every one of us are different. So even if someone with PTSD came to me, I cannot say I know exactly what you need to do because every PTSD case is different. And what you've done by saying that is you've just discounted what's going on for that person and you've isolated them further. So that's always one of the things I say is like, I know exactly what you need to do. The other one is saying, I know just how you feel. No, you do not. And again, it's one of those things that discounts people. So I usually find they're said with the most positive intent to make people feel comfortable, but they don't work that way. So I always encourage people that if someone's coming to you to talk about their mental health, it's a huge compliment because it means they trust you enough to talk to you about this. And what they want more than anything else is just to be heard. And ask some questions about how you feel, like are there people around, like things like that work really well. On the other hand, if you have someone that you feel might be experiencing some pressures and mental health issues, but they're not talking, that then becomes an I conversation, which means I've been noticing that like things are different or that you seem to be this way. Like I've been seeing this. So it's a lot of I see or I feel and like, can I help? So on that side, it's more about the I side. If you come out with, you know, you really have been having some challenges lately, it kind of is an accusation. People might not be ready to talk about it. But if you're simply saying, I've noticed, or I'm wondering, or I question, and that you're there when they need you, that's a big help. So the conversation piece is a lot more complex than that, but just that's sort of some simple things that I see is that, and that's probably the biggest single training that you can do for managers is how to have that conversation. And what I always find is that asking questions is probably the best conversation to have. It's just knowing what questions you can ask to make people feel comfortable in telling you that. So that's kind of my take on it. Again, everyone's going to be different, so it's just being aware of that. But again, the two things I obviously just get graded about all the time is that I know just how you feel, or here's what I think you should do. I've had more people try to solve my problems than I care to think about. And I've got a really good therapist. So like that's as good as I've got. So I thought we'd do a little exercise in the sense of, I usually do this and it's called Kill the Company. Sounds worse than it is. So I thought today we just do it as Kill the Culture. So usually when I ask people, like, what can we do differently? You get the same answers. But when I go this way, for some reason, people get really engaged and come up with all kinds of new ideas. So if I said, we're going to kill the culture. So you've got a new competitor coming in, and I think based on the people on the call, let's say it's a new hotel or accommodations. They don't have any legacy issues. So they've got a brand new culture they're just building from scratch. So the question is, what would they do differently? So this new competitor comes in, they take half of your staff and retain them. What would they be doing differently that would attract and retain the staff? So what are some things you would be seeing?
Probably the flexibility of schedule, I would think.
Schedule flexibility would be a big one. So that took a quarter of your staff right there. Like, what else would they be doing?
Rate of pay.
Yeah. I didn't rule out anything. So they're paying more. Yeah. So they've got flexible job schedules, higher pay. I almost want to be there. Anything else they might be doing?
I'm just wondering, would they be proactive to say something like, don't kid yourself, this is a very stressful job, and to give some examples of, what they might encounter, how it might make them feel, things like that, and that, talk about it beforehand instead of just trying to not to ignore it,
Yeah. Hope it doesn't get too bad.
Exactly.
Like being honest up front is really going to open up a lot for people. It's great. Yeah. Anything else they might be doing? So they're honest and proactive. They're higher pay. They've got flexible job scheduling. Anything else you think they might be doing to make the environment healthier, Stephanie?
Clarity and honesty around paths for your career,
Ooh.
as well as pay increases over time, and how to access benefits and perks associated with your role. I think a lot of workplaces have versions of all of this, but they may not be clear and accessible to folks when they would like to access them.
Yeah, perfect. Just out of interest, like the second biggest reason why people left their jobs. The first one was the culture. The second was no career potential. That was their perspective on that. So you've gone through that. If a competitor came in, they've got no legacy issues. They can do whatever they want, and they're going to do things differently. And in doing that, they attract over half the employees in your organization. Like, what did they do differently? And you've talked about scheduling, compensation, being proactive and honest up front about what it's like and being there, the clarity of what's there, and the benefits that are there. One last thing, Stephanie?
I was also thinking too, I know that other things that folks talk about is on the same strain of career paths, it's development as well. So if you were building from scratch, then creating leadership development programs, usually in lasting a year to 18 months, in order to ensure transfer of learning and practice. And on the other side too, not forgetting about employee development. So offering lots of different things. There's digital courses that folks can register and take themselves, or community courses that are being taken, or annual or biannual training days available to folks. And then, building it off of your performance appraisals and feedback that you get there and what people want to be developing.
Perfect. So you've really set up success criteria for what a mentally healthy workplace looks like. So you've got an organization where leaders are getting support and development, so they understand how best to interact with the people around them. You're also providing learning journeys for employees. You're providing clarity of role and understanding what their future looks like. There's flexibility in scheduling. There's compensation that's higher, proactive about what the environment's going to be like and how to work with it, and also proactive in terms of how to access benefits. So this is just what we did. Any key takeaway? There was one common theme that I saw, but any key takeaways from what you had mentioned in terms of what this new competitor would be doing? Stephanie?
Involving the person in the journey.
Yeah, that seems so obvious. I also thought so much it revolved around communication, just that open communication. And sometimes there's things we have to talk about that aren't positive, but the fact that we have those conversations make things a lot better. And involving the person the whole way through. So as someone who does workplace analytics and surveying all the time, I couldn't agree more. The more you involve people and give them the voice, the more likely they're going to be engaged and going to find what they're looking for where you're at. So I'm going to come back to that pesky competitor, but a different way now. So we're going to look at it. We looked at how do you kill the culture. So now we're going to do some blue ocean culture. So blue oceans are always things that no one else is doing that would make a difference. So things that haven't been done in the past that we would do differently. So it would be like, what would be some unique initiatives you might put in place? How could you redefine flexibility for becoming leaders? And what are the elements there? So if you were thinking about, let's go back to the pesky competitor, what new initiatives might they have brought in that would support the mental health of the employees that they hired?
Are we going full brainstorming where there's no such thing as a wrong answer?
There's no wrong answer. This is blue ocean.
Hire a mental health professional who's in the workplace and available. If we're going to go full throw the spaghetti at the wall here.
Yep. I did a similar study for construction, and one of the number one pieces was they wanted on-site access to therapists. Was huge. So just a little aside, you might not find this surprising, or you might. Men are much less likely to talk about mental health than women. But the best way to get a man to talk about what's going on, here's great advice for, I'm gay, so anyway, take this wherever you want, but this is great advice for everybody on the call. If you want to get a man to talk, get them to move. They're more likely to talk when they're moving. So one of the comments about the construction industry was that, well, you've already got an advantage that they're all outside moving anyway, so you can just talk about it while you were doing that. So it was something they looked at. So anyway, sorry, side story. But you're right. Like if you're just throwing in at the wall, what they looked at is like, okay, how do we bring a therapist into the workplace on site? And they looked at fractional offerings for that. So anything else they might be doing? So they've got call a therapist. So you've got therapists actually there. Any other different initiative you think might make a difference?
Availability scheduling. So folks submitting annually or biannually or something, some interval of time, or even more flexible, folks submitting when they're able to, when they are available. So they get some initial say on when they are able to work.
So having a say, that would be huge. Laurel?
Somehow being able to incorporate extra breaks that aren't so rigid and inflexible like most service-centered businesses have.
It's interesting, scheduling came through as a huge issue. Sorry, Brad.
Having a good life-work balance.
So getting to that, we're going to talk about in a few minutes, because there might be another way, because the typical response is going to be, we just don't have enough people for that. So we don't have enough staff. We have a hard time keeping them and finding them. So like, sounds good, but how are we going to do that? I think there's actually new ways developing that we could do that. And it does make a big difference. That is definitely true. And the employee having a say is something you touched on. That's a big issue. I did some work in long-term care, and that I have to admit, long-term care were the worst numbers I've ever seen of any sector. They had the highest levels I've also ever seen with meaning of work and being able to contribute to the patients. But they didn't have any access to their schedules. And the one simple thing that organizations went ahead with was put in automated scheduling. So people could put in, here's the schedule I'd like to work. They knew that they weren't going to get exactly what they wanted, but 60% of the time they did. And the prior situation was that they felt that a lot of managers had favorites and gave the favorites the best time slots. And this way it was just done on an automated basis using AI, and people felt completely differently about their schedules. So just giving people that opportunity to say, here's what I'd like to have. So that makes a big difference. So having autonomy at work is a big issue, and that doesn't come in so much. So we talked about availability in terms of what their schedules look like, having some more flexible breaks, good work-life balance, having an actual mental health specialist on staff. Any common themes that you see? And by the way, I can only see 5 people. So if you're putting your, so if you want to talk and you're below that line, please just break in.
Involving the workers definitely is a common theme.
Yeah, no question. Having a voice was one of the strongest attributes that people valued in the workplace. So it's so funny. I always think like, it's so easy. You just have to ask them. So if you're like, a lot of times leaders and managers will, wrangle their hands, wring their hands about, what do people want? Like, what's it going to take? Ask them. People will tell you. So I do anonymous surveys, which, believe me, they tell you. And people are always worried, but like, what if we hear bad news? I think you should. You're probably also going to hear good news. Like, you might be really surprised at what people say. And what I've always found is that it's way better to know and do something about it than to ignore it and see it turn into something that you just can't handle. So,
I
so
find
yeah.
I find that for myself when it comes to surveys and involving folks, the fear is not necessarily hearing something bad. It's hearing passion for something that we don't have the ability to change, especially change immediately. There may be some things over time that may be able to be done, but if there's some things that are kind of your hands are tied on, and then folks become more dissatisfied because you can't make that change. So then they feel like voicing their concerns or their wants or their needs, it's not worth it because they feel that they're not being heard. So I find that that's more of an issue that's my personal fear whenever getting feedback. It's not the bad news. It's when folks are passionate about things that I don't have the ability to make meaningful change from their perspective on.
So really good point. A lot of people will say there's survey fatigue, which I totally and utterly disagree with. It's usually that no one ever communicates what came back from the survey, or no actions ever taken. So it's just like we filled in a survey for what. So what I would say, like Stephanie, sometimes there's just things we can't do. And I had a session last week with a company of engineers, so really open and talkative. But they were very much like, here's the rules. We can't do that. But then if you involve people and say like, okay, everyone brought up this, but we're restrained or constrained by this. I love a great constraint because that really gets some innovative thinking. So if you actually say like, here's the challenge, we're only allowed to do this. What are some ways we could work around it? I think you get two things. One, you get a positive feedback from just the discussion itself. The fact that you're open, like, everyone was passionate about this, but we're really constrained by this. Like, okay, they understand. And then that openness to go, okay, what else, like, what could we do? Like, if we don't have money for that, like, what could we do? Things like that. And I find that if you involve people again, they're going to be really engaged in terms of what could be done, and it makes a big difference. And again, I'm sold on years in terms of, if you ask employees, they'll actually tell you. And I'm one of these reformed, horrible managers of the past, the command and control type. I was so worried about people finding out that I had mental health issues that I was incredibly controlling, micromanaging. I used to sit on Sundays for 4 hours dictating what I wanted people to do for the week. So, like, not a big surprise, we had a revolving door. And I would say, like, now the sun just shines out of my whatever. Like, what I learned is that, when you start talking to people and when you start asking them questions, they really respond, and they really give you what you're looking for. So it's one thing I always encourage. So I think that's a really long comment on all that, that the key takeaway there is the involving of people, I think. So we talked about communication being a big issue and involving people being a big issue. Those two things make a big difference. So technology, how can that actually be part of your plan for mental health? What does that look like in terms of improving resilience and quality of work? So I've got to be really honest and say that I'm an AI advocate, possibly a disciple, I'm not sure. So I started working with AI about 4 years ago. I had let's go with advantage. I had the advantage of having the 4 people who worked with me were all 32 years old. They just all happened to be born the same time. So they're all 32. They drove me absolutely nuts because they never stopped asking questions, but it was the best working environment I ever had. And amazingly, all 4 of them stayed with me for almost 8 years, which I heard was unheard of. But anyway, 2 of them were actually developers who worked with OpenAI as testers before chat was released. So they were really engaged and got me interested. And I got so interested, I actually went to MIT and got a degree in AI business strategy. So I absolutely love it. And the way I look at AI is that, used thoughtfully, I think it can not only improve productivity from a business perspective, I think it can improve, this goes back to your comment, Brad, I think this is the way we can improve the quality of work and life for employees. So AI can reduce a lot of the pressures we feel, and that can take some of the stress levels down, and that will reduce the impact we have on mental health. So I think there's so much that we can do with AI. I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about it, kind of looking at ways that, again, it might play into what you're doing. So I see it as the electricity of our generation. It's not a fact of whether it's going to be in your organization, that's just going to be. That's just when it's going to happen. There's efficiency increases, which is where most people are focused, but it also really can enhance customer experience. People have terrible memories of the old chatbots when they first came in. Chatbots today are very different. They're human sounding, like you can have real conversations with them. Like I can create podcasts. I could create a podcast of this presentation, and it's interactive, so that you can ask a question and would go, oh, Brett, that's a really good question, and respond to it. And I love it. And that takes about like 3-4 minutes to do it. And so I frame what I want who the audience is going to be, what I want the main focus to be, and it creates this podcast of two people talking. You can clone voices, you can clone my voice, and we had cloned my voice to do the podcast, but I said, do I really sound that nasally? Like, that's really bad. And Brian, who works, he said, yeah, that's how you sound. Okay, we're not using me. But there's so many different ways you can do it. So this is one thing where if we're looking to increase communication, we can do that. Customer experience, I always find the rule of two. If you get hit with two things that the AI can't answer or can't handle, it should transfer immediately to a human being. So there's things like that you just put in place that it can work. So it's not that we don't see the opportunity, but we're really slow at adopting. So what's happening right now is that about 73% of Canadian organizations are not adopting AI or not integrating it. So we've got a lot of wait and see. Only about 6% of Canadian companies have integrated AI. That compares to about 13 in the US and compares to 20% in Europe. And surprisingly, I do a bit of work in Dubai and found out that almost 60% of companies in the Middle East are using AI. They have moved really quickly, and Southeast Asia would be even higher. So we are really lagging. And everybody, I'm sure, is aware of the productivity numbers that Nova Scotia is at the bottom of all provinces and all states in terms of our productivity levels. So if we think we're going to catch up and outrun them, we're not. We've already shown that we can't out-execute. So now is the time we could really start looking at AI and what it could do for us. So I find the three big questions are, what are the actual benefits? Everybody thinks of ChatGPT when they think of AI. It's just one form. There's so many different types of AI that's just one form of it. So what are the actual tangible benefits? I do a fair bit of work with integrating AI into cultures, and in the last few weeks, I've worked with an HVAC company, solar panel company, a marketing firm, a recruiting firm, financial services, insurance. So like, it doesn't matter what type of organization you have or what sector you're in, AI does apply. The bigger question I find people have is, where do we even start? And I think the mistake that most people have made is that they'll see something amazing that AI can do and think, oh, we need to do that. And they bring it in and have no idea what to do with it. Or they think this is going to be a great idea. Let's have it available for everybody. And they announce it, bring it in, and no one uses it. So you can guess what one of the main problems is, because you talked about it before. If you don't involve the employee, they're not going to use it, or they're going to resist it as much as possible. So I always think you really have to start with, what's the problem you're trying to solve? So if scheduling is the problem, then start there. ChatGPT can't do much for you with scheduling, but there are types of AI that can. And you include employees by, okay, how is scheduling now, what's working, what's not working. I do a lot of mapping. So just mapping out what it looks like to do this work. And that's when you find out where the friction points are, where the opportunities are. And then you can come back with something that employees actually were a part of and they jump on it. And that's where you start seeing things really change. And then what's the risk and challenges? Because there is no question that AI does bring a higher level of risk to the organization, but there's very little that we do that doesn't have risk. So what it comes down to is just naming it, mitigating it, and moving forward. So that's kind of my piece on that. Biggest challenge we have is only 8% of leaders have a strategy about AI. So most leaders are not comfortable with AI. They don't use it themselves. So therefore, they're not really bringing it out. But more than half of employees are using AI at home. So they're already using it at home. And they're pushing for, why can't we be using this at work? It could really change the way things happen. And as I mentioned, no big surprise. The best thing that I see is employee perspectives, that untapped gold. I worked with a bakery, and the owner said, "You really want to survey our staff?" I said, "Yeah, I do. Like, I want to find out how they experience the whole environment." And they were excellent. Like, the comments that people bring back are always really surprising. The technicians at the HVAC company, this is amazing. So when you ask people, they'll tell you. And more than anything else, AI is a change management process. And that means you really do have to involve people. Employees, more than anybody else, know how the business works. They see what it's like in terms of the processes, how they work or not. They know where you could add value that customers would really appreciate, where the friction points are, and they know what capabilities are needed. They're the ones who actually know what's going on, and they're also going to say the training that they need to be able to adapt and adopt. I think there's a big misconception too that you need to have techies or tech people on staff. You do not. I have greatest example of one person who works with me. He doesn't have a university education. He was a personal trainer for a long time, and then he started working for me doing some design work, and he's got this incredible eye for design. So everything you see is his work. And I've got to say, like, I did pressure him. So about a year and a half ago, I pressured him to, you should really learn how to use AI. You should really look at what would fit for you. Like, there's different types of applications that you could use. So on his own, he taught himself. So now he's built his own recording studio. He can make videos, he can make audio, he can do podcasts. To see this person go from someone who always thought they'd be in a frontline role, suddenly see that their whole career changed, things that they could do that would be very different. So I always find, like, never underestimate who is the person that really wants to learn and really wants to go forward with AI. So when you're thinking about AI from a couple different aspects that we've talked about, how do you think it could actually improve accessibility for managers? So one of the biggest comments was that, "I like my manager, I just can't get anywhere near them." Anything you think that AI might be able to do?
So I was at an HR forum in September for the tourism sector, and there were a lot of HR, a lot of management positions there, and our sector really struggles. Well, I know you made a point about Nova Scotia, but this was in Ottawa. Our sector really struggles with how AI can be applied, because so many of our positions are interact with people. So like, looking at that and then thinking about AI, and I know what you mean about it saving time and things, but I think it's hard for us to wrap our heads around how AI can be used for us as a sector.
So the most fun, perhaps not the most fun you'll ever have, but one of the most fun things that you can do is you map what a manager does during the day. So I usually start there. If we know that manager accessibility is a challenge, I don't even talk about AI when we start this exercise, but we map it out. And people were really open to the mapping. So they talk about, what is a day in the life of a manager like? So typically what I would see for managers is 20 to 25% of their time is spent filling out forms. There's usually a lot of roles that they have that are repetitive, that are time consuming, that are not that engaging, that usually involve some type of form filling. When we did the long-term care piece, it was 20% of long-term care managers' days were spent filling out forms and checking that forms were filled out. So what we did for them was we built an AI assistant who managed all the form filling, which freed up their time. And we almost had to do training on what do you do with extra time, because they just weren't used to having that. So I would say there's a bit of pushback from tourism because that interaction with the visitor, interaction with the customer is such a big piece. But I think tourism is probably one of the most open industries to using AI. And in a lot of other countries, it's really taken off. So I would say, so I worked with a journalism department where, as you can guess, AI is like a four-letter word. It's going to take away our jobs. It's going to take away our creativity. It's horrible. It's awful. It's like Terminator. So I wasn't allowed to mention AI. I worked with 56 journalists, and I was told that they were going to be hostile and mean. They actually were really great. Again, you get them talking, and we went through a day in the life, and I decided then and there that I never ever want to be a journalist because just the deadlines were beyond belief. But what we found was like it was over 40% of their work could be done by AI. And what it allowed them to do is focus on the things that they wanted to do, which was actually connecting with other human beings. So being able to tell a story by talking to someone, not researching it in different, information banks. I do find an irony about AI is that as a technology, it actually helps us connect to other humans more effectively. So almost all uses of AI frees us up to actually interact with other humans more often. So it can change a lot. And for small organizations, I know in Nova Scotia, there'll be a lot of, like everywhere else, a lot of small, medium-sized businesses. AI does not cost $100,000. There's lots of inexpensive, accessible ways to implement AI that would make a difference. And right now, there's so much money available. Government is really trying to encourage AI adoption, and there's lots of grants available specifically for tourism as well. But what's really sad from my perspective is that most of these organizations are giving the money back because each year people aren't using it. And so there's one organization I work with. They had about $600,000 in grants available for businesses. They gave 4 of it back. So like they said, like this is their second year of AI grants. If they don't give the money away this year, they probably won't get it again. So there's lots of money out there. And sorry, I'm rambling on and on and on, but it just can make such a difference. And if I go to that next question, how do you think AI could reduce stress in the workplace?
Michael, just a quick note on that. It's just the simple AI chat. The amount of letters and the amount of emails and that you have to put together. I use it. It's crazy the time saving.
Yeah, huge. And once it gets used to you, it can almost become you in a way. So use your tone, things like that. Yeah, very much. Great, Brad.
Taking a lot more workload off the managers so that the managers can focus on the team more and their mental health.
Yeah, no question. There's a reason I have those questions in the order, because if you find a way to help the manager, that immediately helps everybody else. When you're talking about accessibility of understanding, I think Stephanie had mentioned that just understanding the different routes for or processes for mental health supports, things like that. You could easily develop a chatbot portal. Did some work with a group of hospitals in Ottawa. You may be surprised at this. The doctors did not really want to talk to the patients. Like, how surprising is that? But that's such a big thing. It's like the patients wanted to have interaction and had questions for the doctors after the treatment. So they end up setting up a chatbot. And one really funny aspect is, and it applies in tourism big time, is that you're supposed to name the AI. When people, it's called anthropomorphizing, one of my favorite words of the year. So you anthropomorphize, which means you make it human-like. So the doctors named their AI Henry. So Henry also had a British accent. I find when chatbots have foreign accents, people respond more effectively to them. Henry had a British accent, not Cockney, because that would have been really bad, but found that almost 80% of questions that patients would have wanted to talk to doctors they were quite happy talking to the chatbot, to Henry. And there's a hotel in the Caribbean that had a automated take the bags to the room, automatic concierge, and they called it Stephen. And they said it was funny how employees started like, so they had to take Stephen in for some work, I guess, for a week. And they said like employees were saying like, where's Stephen? Like, is something wrong with him? Like, something happened? So actually like giving this, chat or this robotic some human characteristics. So AI can reduce stress all over in the sense of there's probably things that employees are doing as well. I find we do love our reporting, and that usually tends to be where we bog people down with reporting this, reporting that. The whole cash management system in any type of hospitality or tourism organization, just connecting that and making it one simple system that everybody can use, huge difference. Having processes and procedures with a chat interface could be huge to help people know what to do in certain situations so they don't have to go to a manager. Things like that can be really helpful. What about on the mental health resources side? Like, what could AI do there? So one thing I would immediately do is an AI chatbot for mental health. So for people trying to find out where to find resources, what resources are there. You talked earlier about sometimes people don't actually know what access they do have. It's private, it's confidential, so they could easily contact or go the route they need to go through on that side. The great thing about AI is it can pick up on sentiment, where sometimes if it's a human, we hear what we want to hear. Whereas AI would actually, without bias, measure the sentiment. It can actually flag challenges, things like that. There is such a thing as an AI therapist, if you can believe it. I've used them, and I'm actually blown away by how good they are. So there can easily be some type of AI therapy support. So you might not be able to hire a therapist to have on staff, but you could have an AI therapist where people can ask questions knowing that this is an AI you're talking to. But and I love to debate my own therapist on this. Like, I think the world of him. I've gone to him for 10 years, so he's great. But he's 45 years old, so he's only had 20 some years of experience. I said, AI's got millions of years of experience from everything being put in there. So it can pick up on all kinds of things. So in a support role, AI can make a huge difference. And you're quite lucky because tourism has specific grants to explore. So not to cross sell, but I never miss an opportunity. So if you're ever interested, you can get grants to actually work with me to find out how AI could actually fit into the organization. What do you think employees would say about AI in the workplace?
I was just going to ask that same question to you.
Get an answer, just seeing if anybody, what do you think they might be feeling, Brad?
I think a lot of them would be very mixed feelings. There's a lot of older generation, especially within our organization, that I don't think would adapt to it. However, the new generation, as you said, a lot of us have like AI such as Google or Alexa or vice versa, the home automation side would be a lot more okay with it. But again, I think the older crowd, I think they would find it a lot more challenging at first.
Yeah, there's a high fear level. That's probably so I did a study for anyway, I did a study of employee perspectives on AI in November. 2,500 Canadian employees, 1,000 Atlantic Canada. The fear was striking. Like, it was like over 2/3 of employees were afraid of what AI would do in the workplace. And that mainly came down to only about 20% understood what AI was. So they had a big fear of something that they didn't really understand. So raising awareness of it, talking about it is a huge issue. But once people like understand that it's there to help, not to displace, that became something people got really interested in. So again, as always, it's the communication and involvement of people that really helps move something further.
And I think that's it. There's a fear that their job is going to be replaced by, you talked about in the Caribbean, the concierge named Steve. So there's that perceived threat in some cases that a real concierge person is going to be replaced by AI, when in some cases, there isn't a concierge person anymore. Maybe that front desk agent has to do concierge and the front desk. Maybe not, where that AI might actually free up the front desk agent's role so that they can spend more time with the guests. So to your point, it's the communication and explaining, if that's brought in, why it would be beneficial, to the business and what the role would be, and that it's not replacing. Because you see a lot of, if we use Asia in some places as an example, where the front desk agent is gone, right? And AI is potentially doing everything,
Yeah.
But the reality is that's not going to be the case anytime soon, certainly not in Nova Scotia. So, it could be a very positive experience.
Yeah, and it's interesting topics. You brought up a number of them there, Lynn, that, the last one is like Asian culture is also very different than Canadian, particularly Nova Scotian. So, we thrive on that connection to other people. And, with the concierge, the AI concierge, it mainly did everything the human concierge didn't want to do. And that really changed the whole outlook in terms of like, okay, I'll never have to do that again. Perfect. I'm into it. And I always find the whole mapping exercise is not so much just what you don't want to do, but also what would you like to do more of? And that's where things do open up. And it's always, 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 what do I want to do more of? Connection to human beings and being able to leave my work at that time and leave work. Like I'm not worrying and thinking about it after I leave. So again, I gave you a fair warning that I'm a bit of a disciple for AI, but I just believe it can so change the way we work and live, that I think it's really something we have to look at. So just coming to the end, I just want to do a little bit of an exercise called decision filter. So we talked a bit about this, and you could go back and use some of those examples, but when you're thinking about workplaces you've seen that are really mentally healthy, what are the things that you've admired most? Like what things really stood out that they did? It doesn't have to be in tourism. Like what are the things that they did that really helped their employees keep the stress down and keep their mental health in a good place?
Well, I'll speak. Our counterparts in Ottawa are able to have a gym like downstairs, so their employees can go and work out when they want to, and then go back upstairs and go back to work. So that's awesome that you don't have to try to do it after work or before work, or you can actually fit it in through your day and then go right back. And so I think that's amazing that they can do that balance.
Perfect. Anything else you think? So companies that really do it well, Brad?
Meal plans and uniforms being kept up for you, and having all that here, like on site, that people can utilize. So that's less pressure on them to get themselves ready in the morning or get their lunches, and less pressure to get their clothes done on the weekend. So freeing up more family time for family.
Perfect. Anything else that would come to mind? Yep.
Yeah, when you're off, you're off. Like the expectation to be available 24/7. It's it's not always there. I mean, a lot of us probably check our phones and our messages anyway, but it's not something that's expected, which is, really good.
Perfect. Thanks, Rob. Anything else that you think of? Things that companies do really well?
I'm aware of one organization that actually brings puppies in for the employees to interact with.
On to the dogs. It always happens.
Yeah. So,
Nothing better than dogs. Pets make a huge difference. So that's great. What about going the other way? If you think about organizations that just horrendous working environment, you just never want to be there. Like, what are the things that really stand out that really almost cause you stress even thinking about them?
Well, somebody made a comment that proper rest zones. So the flip side would be if you have a break and you have nowhere to go, that can be pretty stressful because that's not really a break, is it?
Yeah, you're still at work.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything else that's going on? You mentioned them, a lot of them earlier, like really high pressure, heavy workloads, things like that. No accessibility managers. Brad?
Places with very negative managers and also extremely bad hygiene in it.
Not being able to leave work at the end of the day, like it goes with you after work, weekends, in terms of maybe people calling you or the stress of it.
So a lot of what you're doing is you're bringing up what are the key criteria for a mentally healthy workplace. A number of things you've mentioned, like you look at both sides. So what's the best case, what's the worst case, and they're usually just a mirror image. So the one piece that you brought up really clearly, two things you brought up really clearly is when it's that work-life balance. When you leave work, you leave work. So what really helps people is that break from work. And the other thing is having places for people to actually get a break, whether it's exercise, whether it's zones where you can go, but just having access to that. We always can't have a gym in our facility, but you probably have gyms near, so you could provide time for that. So it's just giving people that time for the break. And I think the other thing too was making things easy for people, like with whether it's uniforms and meal plans, but just how do you make it easy? And the biggest, which I found really fun, was the biggest suggestion from the nurses when I did that study was that if they had designated parking, they said the stress of coming in for shifts and trying to find parking was insane. And I said usually they had to find parking that would be away from the facility, and a lot of times at night that didn't feel safe. A lot of the nurses were women, and that was a big issue. And they said nothing was worse than spending 20 minutes trying to find a place to park and then coming in and seeing how many doctors' places that were designated and not used. So they said if you could do one thing, even better than the bonuses the nurses were paid, is give us designated parking. So you never know what's going to come through. It can make a big difference. Just that's a point of stress, like you said, Brad. Like it could be meal plans and uniforms, things you don't have to think about. Like if you make it easy for people get to work and to leave work, that seems to make a big difference. So talked about a lot of things today, and I just wanted to check in before we stopped. It's just, I always say three, but what's something you're taking away today that you'd like to do, and who would you like to talk to about it? I'm hoping you found today useful and helpful. We've got a minute, so is there anything people kind of was really something that's memorable you'll talk about to somebody else? Rob?
Yeah, I think I'll definitely look into what mental health benefits are available. A lot of times it's overlooked. I know TELUS have phone support as well as their own medical. So I think just kind of bringing that to the forefront to everyone to let them know what we currently have that nobody has ever accessed, right? And that it is there for their use. So I think that will be, step one.
Perfect. Thanks. Anything else? Anybody else?
Investing more time into AI.
Perfect. That's close to my heart. Make my day better. Thanks. Any last thing, Brad?
Might look into automated scheduling for autonomy for the staff.
Yeah, brings us a part of it that makes a big difference. So I know we're at time, and I thank you. So I think a lot of it comes down to, like I was giving you a couple of things to think about. Look at the leadership approach in terms of how to support that mentally healthy workplace. Manager training is probably the biggest single area to look at. Biggest thing too is measuring. So I did a cross-country study. It was really difficult to get to the actual businesses in the different provinces. So one thing I'd encourage is that, as I said, it's hard to know what to do when you don't have the actual numbers. So that's something to look at. I know someone who does that if you're interested. And also look to innovation, like, what does AI look like and how can that work? So we talked about a lot of things today. I hope it was something that kept it sunny for you on a sunny morning. I think it's critical that we support the mental health of the people who work in our organizations. That's going to directly, as we talked about first thing, move to the customer experience, the visitor experience more than anything else. And it just makes it so much more enjoyable to be at work. So I really appreciate you taking time this morning, and I've enjoyed being able to talk with you. And if you get any questions, I am going to send out I'll send to Lynn the copy of the presentation. And if you've got any questions, just please feel free to drop me an email, and you'll actually get me, not a chatbot. So yeah, I'd be more than happy to chat about whatever comes up from the session. So again, thank you so much for this, and I'll pass it back to Lynn.
Mike, thank you so much. And thanks everyone for joining this morning. I must say it's so nice to have a session that is geared towards the tourism sector, that has, stats and information that's pertinent to our sector. So really enjoyed that, and fantastic presentation and interaction. And I really appreciate your time this morning. And Mike, really appreciate your presentation, and grateful that you're going to share that with the participants. So thank you everyone for your time this morning. And thanks very much, Mike. Really, really enjoyed the presentation and the session. So hopefully you all are leaving this morning with a little bit more information and feel good. And I found the AI information, you'll be glad to know, very informative as well, and perhaps a little less scary than before the session this morning. And maybe some information that we can certainly share with our sector in terms of grants. I think that's very interesting, and I'm sure our members have no idea that exists. So definitely something that we can explore. So thank you for sharing that.
Very much.
Stacy? No? Okay. Oh, you're good with that as well. Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Yeah. So we'll look into that and share that information as well. So thanks, everybody.
I was gonna say, just they want to give the money away. So
yeah, well, we like to hear that.
Make them
and
happy.
Might make it a little less scary for people too, if they know there's resources there. And the way you put the spin on it too, again, makes it a little less scary. And, communication, like you said, and explaining it the way you have, I think it really makes a difference as well. Puts it in perspective, and where people's time can be better spent, as opposed to that scary, it's going to take my, or somebody's job away, but rather look at it and how it's going to enhance the job they do.
Right.
And for the team. Yeah.
Very much.
So great. Thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Right. Okay, take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.